The morning sky sagged under a blanket of gray clouds, and the city seemed to sink deeper with every drop of rain that battered its streets. In front of a grand mansion, trimmed hedges, marble fountains, everything polished to perfection, sat a woman in a faded blue uniform. She huddled beneath a lone tree, her hair soaked, her hands trembling as she tried to eat from a small plastic lunchbox. That the rain fell harder, mixing with the tears she didn't bother to hide. Her clothes clung to her chilled body, and she shivered as if warmth was a stranger she hadn't seen in years. And that was when he noticed her, the man who owned that mansion, a man whose wealth could build entire worlds of comfort. But what he learned in the moments to follow shattered him more than any financial loss ever could. Before we continue, if you believe in compassion, second chances, and the power of a simple act of kindness, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pure Hub Kindness. Your support helps spread stories that warm the world. His name was Richard Hale, one of the city's most powerful businessmen. He had risen from nothing, but the climb had hardened him. Success became his armor. Money, his language. He barely noticed the people working for him, faces blurred into the background of his busy life. Maids, gardeners, drivers. They were just part of the scenery. But that rainy morning, something about Maria, his quiet maid sitting alone in the storm, pierced right through that armor. But Maria was always early, always polite, never one to complain. Yet here she was, drenched, shaking, eating as though she had nowhere else in the world to go. Richard watched from inside his car, puzzled. Why would anyone choose to sit in the rain when the mansion had an entire warm kitchen just steps away? He stepped outside, shoes sinking into the wet grass as he approached her. She didn't hear him, or perhaps she didn't want to. When she finally noticed him, she scrambled to her feet, hiding her soggy meal, apologizing as if she had committed some terrible offense. Her trembling hands unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He asked why she was out in the rain. She only whispered another apology and looked away. That should have been the end of it. But the image stayed with him the entire day. Through meetings, phone calls, even the ticking of his luxury watch. He couldn't stop thinking about her. That evening, during dinner, he quietly asked his senior staff member if he knew why Maria never ate inside. The man hesitated before explaining. Sir, she chooses to eat outside. She says she doesn't want to disturb anyone. Richard felt something twist in his chest. The next day, he followed her silently from a distance. She walked to the same tree, carrying a tiny lunchbox wrapped in a plastic bag. Her meal was simple, barely enough to fill a stomach. She sat as if that forgotten corner of the garden was the only safe space she had. Richard approached her again. This time, his voice was softer. Maria, why don't you eat in the staff room? It's warm. There's space. She froze. Then she lowered her spoon and answered with a calm but trembling voice. Sir, once, your guests arrived early while I was eating inside. They said my uniform smelled like detergent and that I shouldn't sit near them. I didn't want to embarrass you again, so I come here. Her words cut through him deeply. He didn't remember that day, but knowing it happened under his roof made him feel hollow, and the sad little smile she gave afterward, trying to reassure him, broke him completely. Over the next few days, he quietly observed her life from a distance. He saw the struggle she hid behind her humble smile. She walked miles every morning from a tiny rented room on the edge of the city. She worked 2 jobs. She raised her son alone after losing her husband in an accident. She barely ate, barely rested, and yet remained gentle, kind, and full of humility. Guilt washed over him heavier than the rain he had seen her endure. One afternoon, he visited her neighborhood, a world far removed from his polished mansion. Narrow streets, peeling paint, leaking roofs, and inside one small, dimly lit room, he found Maria's son studying at a wobbly table. On the wall behind the boy were his drawings, hospitals, stethoscopes, a doctor, and a woman in a blue uniform. Richard understood instantly. The boy dreamed of becoming a doctor, not for fame, but to help people like his mother. That night, sleep refused to come. His wealth suddenly felt empty. He had built tall buildings, but never built kindness. He had money, but no meaning. The next morning, he called Maria into his office. She stood trembling, afraid of what she might have done wrong. Instead, Richard handed her an envelope. Inside was a full educational scholarship for her son, until graduation, and a promotion for her, head of housekeeping, with a salary that would finally allow her to breathe. Her hands shook. Tears fell freely. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, he replied. Just promise me you'll never sit outside in the rain again. Weeks passed. Something shifted in the mansion. Smiles replaced silence. Warmth replaced tension. Even Richard's own family noticed his transformation. He began learning the names and stories of the people who worked for him. He realized success means nothing if your heart remains empty. And every time he passed that old tree, he remembered the moment compassion cracked open a hardened heart. If this story touched your soul, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pure Hub Kindness. Let's spread more stories that remind the world what it truly means to be human. Years later, Maria's son graduated top of his class, a full-fledged doctor. As he walked across the stage, Richard sat proudly in the audience, clapping louder than anyone. When Maria thanked him after the ceremony, he simply smiled. "You gave me far more than I gave you," he said. "You taught me what real wealth is. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one gesture, one look beneath the pouring rain, to change a heart forever."